In 1768, near Chillicothe, Ohio, Tecumseh was born to the reigning Shawnee chief. During his childhood, Tecumseh endured continued expansion onto tribal lands by the United States. Various times throughout his formative years, U.S. militia would cross over to the land the Shawnee occupied. Several conflicts between two set tribes were started by Americans trying to make a claim on tribal occupied lands. The Americans even went so far as to plunder Native American villages. These constant battles between the Shawnee and the Americans included one that led to the death of Tecumseh's father, when Tecumseh was only 8 years old. Tensions rose as the Americans forged further onto Native American lands. Mohawk chief Joseph Brant convinced the Shawnee to give up land in support of an opportunity for it to belong to all of the tribes. The agreement had the tribes working collectively against the American army. The Pan-Indian movement ended in 1794 with the Battle of Fallen Timbers. Despite the tribal loss, Tecumseh proved himself a great and motivated leader, and over 250 men followed him after the alliance collapsed. The United States remained vigilant against Native Americans, forcing Tecumseh and his people to relocate. With the inspiration from his reformed alcoholic brother, also known as the Prophet, Tecumseh started a new campaign to combine tribal efforts against the Americans. Tecumseh spent the next decade and a half developing a strategy that would not only revive the previous confederation, but also potentially expand tribes from west of the Appalachians to the Great Lakes and as far as Mexico. While developing the campaign, Tecumseh saw how much the Native Americans and Americans have changed and shaped each other over the years. Tecumseh realized the Indians incorporated too much of the American culture into their own. He insisted that the Native Americans reject the temptation and turn away from the American influence. In 1791, the thriving trade post known as Tippecanoe was demolished in an attempt to decimate the Native Americans and open up land for American settlers. Around 17 years later, Tecumseh and his brother built a new settlement there known as Prophetstown. American settlers were troubled by the growing activities and powers of Tecumseh's followers. So while Tecumseh was out of town in the late summer of 1811, Governor William Henry Harrison structured a small army of 1,000 men, hoping to destroy the town in Tecumseh's absence. Upon arrival on November 6, 1811, the regiment and the Prophet's representatives agreed to waive hostilities until a meeting could be held. Harrison's men then found an acceptable campsite about a mile west of the village. Enraged by the Americans' movement, the Prophet gathered warriors and attacked the camp. After 2 hours of battle, 37 soldiers were dead, 25 were nearly dead, and over 125 were wounded. The casualties of the Prophet's men are unknown, but their spirit was annihilated. Angered by the Prophet's actions, the warriors stripped him of his power before threatening to kill him. Knowing that Tecumseh would be arriving home soon, Harrison instructed his men to fortify the camp after the battle. None of the soldiers were allowed to sleep that night. Then on November 8th, Harrison and his men burned the now almost vacant town and went home. Upon returning to the village, Tecumseh found it in ashes. Tecumseh feared the reconstruction of the Confederation to be far too risky and Native American survival under the U.S. government to be dim. He gathered his remaining followers and allied with British forces. This was the second and last attempt for Native American unity against white invaders. More settlers arrived, and the Native Americans continued to resist, but inevitably, most of the tribal land was forfeited because they did not have the forces to take on the growing U.S. Army. It is said that Tecumseh placed a curse on the occupants of the White House, starting with Harrison. The curse lasted 140 years, and even then almost claimed another victim. The curse is this. Starting with Harrison's election in 1840, every president elected in a year ending with a 0 will die in office. This continually happened between 1840 and the late 20th century.